With 0.5, Twister became the best build in the game, and I'm here to tell you that the absolute best way to play it is on an Oracle, because in this league, you can now craft the most insane jewels possible. And to instantly see why Oracle is crazy, just look at this shit. That's right. That's a 16 notable timeless jewel without having to waste a single node. And that's on top of the 100% crit you're automatically getting from the Oracle Ascendancy and much more. And in this one, I'll show you how to make the best build in the game and become an expert in twisting titties, along with a lot of different options depending on your budget and your build preferences. In this particular version, I've chosen a lot of extra speed at the expense of damage. If you're running group content, however, then you can ditch some damage. And if you have better gear than me, then you can get more attack speed instead. There are a lot of options to choose from, so let's get into it. But first things first, for the newcomers, let's cover the basics. If you're already familiar, then feel free to skip ahead. We're focusing entirely on Twister for damage and Whirling Slash for speed. These two have a fantastic synergy, where Whirling Slash can be used for movement, and its whirlwinds boost the damage of Twisters. So when we're moving around the map with Whirling Slash, we're boosting our damage without having to think about it. The other cool thing about Twisters is that it eats ground effects for 50% damage gained as different elements. And with the new Taming Prismatic Ring, we're able to craft all of these, not only boosting our damage, but also unlocking a lot of synergies, as we're able to shock, ignite, and freeze enemies easily as well. This is what took the build from one of the best builds to definitely the best build in the game. These interactions are the same for all Twister setups though, so what's special about Oracle? And how are we able to grab that big-ass fucking cluster of damage nodes in the tree? Well, the Oracle has this node, of course, Forced Outcome. This grants us 100% crit, which synergizes nicely with all the crit damage nodes we're grabbing. But the big thing is the Unseen Path and Entwined Realities. The Unseen Path allows us to grab hidden nodes, such as these Rage nodes. And each Rage grants 1% multiplicative damage for our attack skills, which is nice, but we can also utilize nodes like Mystical Rage, boosting our spell damage as well. And then, all we need to do is convert this spell damage into attack damage via Crown of Eyes. The damage this brings is so high, in fact, that if I were to remove it, I'm halving my damage. And when it comes to the Entwined Realities node, we're allowing ourselves to grab all nodes in range of our keystones. So for example, here we have a Heroic Tragedy Timeless Jewel. This allows some nasty fucking nodes like 40% max energy shield and resistances, which is like grabbing 4 nodes elsewhere. Or this node, granting me 50% damage. Pretty insane. But in this patch in particular, we're allowed to craft time-lost jewels with 5 modifiers. And this is where the big value from Oracle comes from. From one jewel alone, I'm getting 32% attack speed and projectile speed, making me and my Twisters fast as fuck, along with doubling my damage via the other passives. And these are easy to craft as well, and you can grab as many as you want. I have one here as well, and I'm planning on grabbing one here as well once I'm not broke as shit. And of course, if you were to ditch the attack speed, you could double my damage as well. But the attack speed makes the build silky smooth. And here is why we're stacking Rage. This league, we also have Medved's Felling, granting us 55% attack speed from our Rage alone. That's pretty bonkers. Now those are the big sweeping changes and important interactions as to why this build is insane. Now let's check out all the gear pieces so you can get the build online ASAP. Starting us off with the most important piece, Crown of Eyes. As mentioned, this doubles my damage. I'm then socketing in additional Rage, and you can also corrupt it for extra spirit. And we want as much spirit as we can, because there are a bunch of different persistent buffs we can benefit from. And here's the currency saver tip number 1. If you buy one with a spirit corrupt, then they will cost anywhere between 10 to 20 divines. But buying them non-corrupted costs fucking 1 exalt. So you can just buy a stash full of them and corrupt everything, and you'll get the spirit corrupt for just a few exalts. Or if you're a lazy swiper, then you can just buy a spirit one, of course. The next item we need is the Taming Prismatic Ring. This has gone down in price by a lot, so you should be able to get one for cheap. And here's currency-saving tip number 2. When boosting its quality, just grab the cheapest one of fire, cold, and lightning, because any of them will work. For the second ring, you want an unset ring for the extra skill, because as mentioned, we're able to benefit from lots of different buffs. Then, you want a lot of rarity and flat damage. And here comes a currency-saving tip again. You can buy a bricked one with life regen and mana leech instead of resistances, because these are 2 stats you need anyways, and then you can just grab resistances elsewhere. Next we have the body armor. The Moria Invictus is so goddamn good this league. For defense, I'm stacking all different defenses: armor, evasion, and energy shield. Your armor will allow you to reduce the low damage hits, whereas evasion will make you near unhittable, because we will ensure that everything is blinded as well for extra chance to not get hit automatically via Twister. Then, we're getting the lesser harm node in the Ascendancy tree, which skyrockets our defenses. Personally, I have 6,600 energy shield and 40-something evasion while in maps, and I haven't died in a week or something. For its stats, the most important is Spirit, followed by Resistances, and lastly, I'm using Attributes. Because this is not only cheaper than grabbing extra defenses, it also solves all of my attribute requirements. And as a cheeky little bonus, we're also going to transform all of our strength into energy shield. More on that when we get to the passive tree. For runes, slot in the reduced curse effect rune, removing most of the effect of temporal chains, rune of foundations, Animanu's gaze, as this grants me more than 600 flat armor when I'm stacking spirit, and then just a regular iron rune. And speaking of defenses, to sustain our energy shield, I'm using Chavron. To use this, all you need is a life flask with instant recovery on it. I rarely get hit, as I'm constantly blinding and freezing everything along with having twisters cover the whole screen and staying away from enemies. But when I do get hit, I just chuck a few health potions and I'm back to full energy shield. This one also only costs like 1 exalt, so you should definitely buy a bunch and corrupt them for extra energy shield or evasion. I noticed that I was using this piece of shit when farming, so I just bought a bunch and corrupted them just now, simple as that. For our remaining armor, we first have our gloves. This league, you can slot in a Cola's hunt, and you can roll marksman modifiers, like projectile ranks. Ideally, you should grab this modifier and then a bunch of defenses or flat damage. I also like having mana leech somewhere, so I never have to think about mana, which is nice seeing as how many of those mana leech fuckers there are in maps. This projectile rank modifier can be quite annoying to get though, so for a currency tip, you can ditch it and focus on flat damage modifiers instead. It will grant you the same amount of damage. For our final armor piece, we have a slick pair of sneakers. Now ideally, I'd love to have the new skill effect duration modifier here, because it allows my twisters to stay up for longer. But having just a lot of energy shield is great as well. The most important though is that you grab a life regeneration roll somewhere, because we will be spending a fuckload of life in this build. We first have medveds, spending life the more rage and attacks we do. And if we spend 5.5% of our life each attack, and we hit like 10 times per second, then it's quite hard to sustain. The same goes for Berserk, which also eats up our max life. But as long as we have a life regeneration roll and grab Chaos Inoculation so we're at 1 health, this is instantly solved, and we don't have to worry about the life costs anymore. The other thing you must grab if you're going to use the new gems is a runic ward rune here, because I'm using Olroth's conviction here to use barrage more frequently, and this one has to spend runic ward. To solve this, I just slotted in a runic ward rune and I don't have to worry about it anymore. Alright, and next we have the amulet and weapons. On your amulet, the most important is that you get projectile skill ranks. The second most important is spirit, and the third is additional defenses and rarity. For anoint, I'm using this new, fantastic anoint. It's a hidden one, meaning you can't find it in the passive tree. It allows me to passively generate different charges, boosting me via charge regulation, for example. To anoint it, you just need a melancholy, a disgusting, and an isolation delirium thingy, in that order. For the ideal amulet, I'd also love to have some good additional anoints or eternal rage, for example, but I'm way too broke to buy that shit right now. And lastly, we have the weapons. For your weapon set 1, all you care about is attack speed. So just go into trade and look for one with as much attacks per second as you can find. You then want your offhand empty, as we're getting Dance with Death for extra attack speed. For our other weapon set, however, I found a way to save a lot of currency, because we really care about 2 things in this weapon set: a lot of damage, crit, and extra projectile ranks or attack skills. What's great about this unique is that it has the 2 most important things of those 4, a lot of damage and a lot of crit chance. The damage comes from the fact that it's insanely slow. It only has 1.4 attacks per second. But that doesn't matter, because the weapon attack speed in our Twister weapon set is completely irrelevant. So if we go to the trade website real quick, type in that we must have base crit chance of at least 10, then these ones are by far the cheapest. The only ones with higher damage are mirror tier weapons. Alright, back to our gear. For offhand, I'm using the Sacred Flame Scepter. It grants me extra damage. It effectively removes resistances on bosses that we're standing close to. It grants me an extra skill I can slot a lot of skills in, and of course a lot of spirit. Ideally, I would love to have a Palm of the Dreamer, but again, I'm broke, because the only one helping me gear up is Beshowers. The rest of you can suck a dong. What good is there being a famous YouTuber if you're not getting free pennies, aye? Alright folks, so that's the gear. For my flasks, I'm using an instant recovery one with extra charged for chevrons, as mentioned, along with immunity to freeze, which is insanely valuable. Breath of the Mountains to create a power charge that will transform into an endurance charge instead via the passive tree. And lastly, the Fall of the Axe for onslaught, granting me some extra speed. Great job, friends. Gear complete. Let's head on to the gem section and see what the hell is going on over there. Starting us right off, we have our Spear Throw. We can actually use this to boost our damage by quite a bit, simply by slotting in Bater's Vengeance. This grants us extra damage as cold, based on our max rage, as long as you use Spear Throw every 30 seconds or so. I'm not really using it currently, but it's a great way to boost our damage. It also fills up the cold damage part of Trinity quickly. To make it easier to use, we have Salvo for extra projectiles, and then we just need to make sure that it freezes. So we slot in Freeze, Cold Attunement, and Embitter for lots of extra cold damage. For this to be usable, we really need to make sure it instantly freezes for Baters, or else it's rather useless. Our Righteous Descent is from the unique weapon. Not really used, but it looks cool. Purity of Fire comes from our Sacred Flame Scepter. It grants us 48% fire res, but you're also able to slot in any spirit support gems here without spending spirit, which is a nice bonus. For Whirling Slash, all we give a shit about is getting it to attack quickly. So we're actually grabbing a level 1 Whirling Slash just to ensure it costs as little mana as possible. Then we have Medved for attack speed, rapid attacks for more attack speed, and knockback. This one's insanely underrated, as knocking back enemies will make traversing much easier. Lastly, Blazing Critical for some extra damage, and Rigwolds if you can afford it. Else just slot in whatever. Also, make sure this is only set to weapon set 1. Next, we have Twisters. We set this to weapon set 2, and it'll snapshot any passives we have in that set for their entire duration. To increase our projectiles, we have Salvo, and for extra projectile speed, we have Projectile Acceleration. Because extra projectile speed means they spread out more, along with being able to return and hit enemies additional times. Next, Armor Break 3 allows us to generate endurance charges, which will transform to frenzy charges via resonance, which in turn will allow us to cast Twisters additional times when we use Barrage. Lastly, Rage Forged is an easy 35% damage bonus, as we're always topped off on Rage, and Gigachad's is by far the best support gem in the game when it comes to damage. So if you can afford it, then it's definitely a great option. If you're insanely rich, then you could also slot in Rakiatas here. But then you'll have to make sure you're staying away from enemies due to Sacred Flame reducing resistances, along with making some changes to the passive tree. More on that later, because now we have Eternal Rage. This is our rage generator. I also use Precision here for some extra attack speed via the passive tree, simply because I had some extra spirit to spend. What sucks balls about this skill is that this league, it has to be active in both weapon sets, whereas in previous leagues we were able to save some spirit by only having it in one of them. In any way, just grab it and then grab Berserk. This one we only need in set 2 though, as this is where we have all of our damage. You also want this at the highest level possible for extra rage effect. And since I'm using a Morior Invictus with plus attributes on it, I don't really have to care about its strength requirements. Next up, I have Charge Regulation. I'm using this in both weapon sets. We're going to try to keep this one up with all the 3 charges as often as possible. This is done by generating charges via our Thaumaturgical Dynamism, our Charms, the Armor Break 3 in our Twisters, but also via our Wind Dancer here. This generates evasion for us, but we can also use Culmination for it to expend combo when we get hit, which triggers Aelith's Chimes, which in turn generates a power charge for us that we transform into endurance charges. Meaning, as soon as we get hit, we'll get the defensive bonus from Charge Regulation. Then I'm slotting in Magnified Area for the Gale Force effect to gain extra AoE, where it'll both blind and maim enemies as soon as we're hit. Next up, we have Ice-Tipped Arrows. This I'm using in set 2 for extra damage. This skill empowers my Twisters to deal a substantial amount of extra damage, but the main reason I'm using it is to transform all its damage into cold via Embitter and have it as my source of cold damage to boost Trinity. I'm also using Living Lightning here. Because I have lightning damage on my weapon, this skill can trigger Living Lightning, which in turn can generate combo for my Aelith's Chimes, making it easier to generate charges. And lastly, I'm just boosting it with AoE, extra ice fragments, and additional cast speed, so I won't have to stop to cast it. For our next skill, we have Barrage, having it used in set 1, but it doesn't really matter. This is used to repeat our Twisters more times the more frenzy charges we have. To boost it, I'm using Olroth's Conviction and Uhtred's Constellation. This allows me to always empower my Twisters even if I'm spamming them often. They cost a few divines, but pairing these two is definitely worth it in my opinion. You do, however, need to make sure your barrage is on the lowest level possible and pair it with efficiency, as it'll otherwise waste too much of your runic ward to be spammable. And if you're on a budget, then just grab a higher level barrage with second wind or whatever the fuck you want, broke boy. Lastly, heightened charges for a chance to double its effect, and rapid casting to make it faster to cast. Alright, and then we have our Trinity. I'd love to have this in both sets, but I only have the spirit for set 2, using it only for the damage bonus. You need to make sure this is level 20, as it then generates 6% damage rather than 5 per 30 affinity. But since we can just slot in Fire Mastery, you can just grab a level 19 gem, which costs basically nothing. We're then trying to gain all 3 elements. How you do this will depend a bit on how your damage rolls look, as you'll have to deal cold, fire, and lightning damage to keep it topped off. But as mentioned, Sacred Flame provides the fire, Ice-Tipped Arrows and Spear Throw provides most of the cold, and Herald of Lightning will be our source of lightning. And lastly, Herald of Thunder. As mentioned, this is used for Trinity, but also for extra clear. I have this in both sets and boost it via Longshot for extra damage, Cold Embitter, which helps out a bit with the cold damage for Trinity, Elemental Armament for extra damage, Magnified Area for AoE, and Ambush for more crit chance. Lovely. Hey, nicely done, you managed to stick around this far, eh? It's almost like you don't have any attention deficit, but more likely you probably skipped here. And in that case, eat a fart, and we'll get on with the passive tree. As we already mentioned, I fucking love the Oracle. It allows for some nasty passive trees, and to allow for this, we grab the Unseen Path and Entwined Realities to be able to save a bunch of nodes. We also have lesser harm for defense, of course, and forced outcome for fuckloads of damage. We then grab all of these lovely damage nodes, getting both of its bonuses as we're converting spell damage to attack damage. We then find our lovely rage nodes and this magnificent cluster. Now this is important, so listen up. Here I have a heroic tragedy, timeless jewel. The most important part of this is that it has the line Varana in it, because then we can convert a nearby keystone into this bonus, transforming strength into energy shield. The annoying part, however, is this seed right here. Depending on your seed, the nearby nodes will look completely different. And as you can see, I have some nasty nodes here, boosting my energy shield, evasion, and damage. So, how the hell should you grab this one then? Well, you likely won't get an identical one. But that's fine, because all you have to do is buy a bunch of them, insert them either here or up by mind over matter. Then you just check what passives you find. If the passives suck balls, then you just sell the jewel for the same price and buy another one. Simple as that. It's definitely worth it, because you can find some insane ones, allowing you to double your defenses with just a few extra nodes. Or if you're lazy, you just grab any Varana jewel and grab nodes elsewhere. Either way, you want to head on over here next and grab Mystical Rage for your weapon set 2, as this is where we have our damage. Then we fuck off over here because we want the extra skill effect duration in set 2 and a split personality ruby with Ranger in it. One with Shadow would also work if you need more defenses, but the reason we use this is to save a lot of nodes, as we want to head on over here to get a bunch of extra damage nodes, extra attack speed for set 1, and a regular Sapphire. For my Sapphires, I'm simply grabbing a lot of extra energy shield. That's the most important part. Then you can look for extra crit. The extra crit for spells is a brick though. After that, grab extra attack speed, Catalysis, which will allow you to trigger your Breath of the Mountain Charm when you take physical damage. And then, this whole cluster of attack speed nodes, where Dance of Death is the reason we leave the weapon set 1 offhand naked. We also have Falcon Dive here, which is why I'm stacking some accuracy in my support gems. Alright, next head on upwards, grabbing extra frenzy charges, which we only need in set 1, as Twister can keep generating charges despite us being in set 1 and whirling slashing. Pretty cool. This then allows me to grab these nodes instead for extra crit chance and crit damage. If you're rocking Garacans, then you're looking for roughly 50% crit chance. Next is another jewel where I'm looking to grab something like this simply because I want a lot of tankiness. Alright, Then we head on up here where we find these lovely clusters of nodes. We're going to want this AOE cluster because I've set it up so you get exactly 0.6 meters as your twister radius here without having to grab any gems or AOE on your jewels or gear. Then we have some defensive nodes, and all of these 16 magnificent nodes for damage, attack speed, and all that good stuff, all funneling into a lovely time-lost emerald. Here you should be looking for crit chance and crit damage. You don't really need a 5 passive one, you could just grab a cheap one with 4 as long as you have the very large radius, which by the way is just a cheap delirium to slam on. Or if you want this exact one, then I could write up a crafting guide. In any way, attack speed is great for speed, projectile speed for clearing, and then crit chance and crit damage for, well, a lot of fucking damage. We also have resonance here, of course, which is how we're transforming our charges, ensuring that our most important one, frenzy charges that is being kept up when mapping. And lastly, we head on up here, grab chaos inoculation so we won't die when spending life. These 2 nodes for ailment and stun threshold, which are mandatory, along with some extra nodes to boost our damage. I'm also using a near identical jewel up here for the speed and damage. Also, this is the node you need to ditch if you've got a Racchiata. Because we're instantly freezing everything, we're eliminating enemy resistances, which fucks up the Racchiata damage bonus if we were to use it. Alright folks, that's the passive tree. Let's head on over to a map now and see how the hell you're supposed to play the build. And fortunate for you, as per usual, the build is fucking brain dead. So even you donkey brains should be able to dominate with it. All you need to do to wipe out the screen is use whirling slash 3 times. Press your barrage, followed by pressing the twister button. This will ensure you commit X number of war crimes on every single mob in the map. If you're rocking Olroth's Conviction in your barrage, then you have a total of 3 twister casts before you need to press barrage again. Just look at the barrage button down here, and you'll get used to the rotation and uptime in a few maps. Once those 3 charges are done for, then you just press barrage and twister again. For movement, you of course have whirling slash, so you don't really need to give a shit about pressing whirling slash 3 times before twistering, as you'll be using it all the time. The only thing you need to care about really is pressing barrage, that and keeping up your ice-tipped arrows, which is up for at least 30 seconds when you press it. The same goes for your Bater's Vengeance, if you decide to use it. And if you decide you need the damage from Bater's, then you just press your spear throw from weapon set 2 once, then you can keep on twistering with your new buff up. Simple as that. For bossing, you do pretty much the exact same thing. Before the boss spawns, just press your ice-tipped arrow and barrage, along with 3 whirling slashes, of course. Then once he spawns, you nuke the shit out of him with twisters. If you don't kill him, then you just hit the whirling slash button 3 times twister and repeat. By then, he should definitely be dead. Alright friends, that's all for this one. You'll now be an expert in twisting titties. Drop a sub if you learned something, eat a dick, and I'll see you in the next one.